Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician, and this is Holomancer.
Also welcome the daring reporter Dora.
We are infinitely grateful that we have another opportunity to see you all again.
Today we will talk about the consequences of the increase in the number of new cards in the standard format, and the future of mini-sets.
We have the impression that Blizzard has reached a dead end with this concept. The company does not understand what to do next and even turned to the players with a large survey.
But before we start, we want to express our gratitude to our new patron Gushix. Dear friend, thank you for joining the community of mathematicians. It is incredibly important for us. Also many thanks to our constant and reliable sponsors. Dear friends, your help is really invaluable.
Let's get to the point. To date, we have a record number of cards in the standard format. Moreover, next year the total number of cards will increase again. Festival of Legends will be the second set in the Hearthstone history with 145 cards.
In 2020, most of the useless classic and basic cards have been replaced with the core set. After that, the total number of new cards increased from year to year. In total, over the year of the Hydra we have received 156 cards more than in the previous year. The core set is gradually growing, filled with potentially stronger cards from older sets. We regularly receive mini-sets. Plus we received 2 new classes, which led to an increase in the number of cards in the main sets. According to our surveys, players love new cards and want to have as many of them in the game as possible. But how does this approach actually increase the variety in the game?
So, out of 1341 cards currently available in Standard, only 577 are useful. This means that 43% of the cards are used in the metagame, including in effective low-level archetypes. A year ago, during the same period, 1% more cards were useful, and in 2020 more than half of the cards were useful. We had the least useful cards in March during the Descent of Dragons phase. According to our notes during the Rostakon's Rumble period, the number of useful cards was 45%, even despite the fact that the expansion had an extremely low impact on competitive play and is one of the worst failures. Let's add to this the total number of archetypes during this period. We had the most archetypes at the stage of Darkmoon Fair. Despite the failure of Rostakon's Rumble and the absence of 2 playable new classes, there were more archetypes during this period than now.
As you can see, a significant increase in the number of new cards does not increase variety, rather the opposite. The more new cards we get, the less useful cards we have, which in turn directly affects the number of archetypes in the metagame. We are not sure that this trend will change after the rotation and the release of Festival of Legends.
Moreover, based on our data, we can conclude that we had much more variety before the introduction of the core set, the release of 2 new classes and the appearance of mini-sets. Agree, this is a rather paradoxical situation. In our previous video, we talked about the worst legendary cards from the year of the Griffin sets, which can be safely disenchant. It is worth noting that only a few legendary cards turned out to be completely useless, but a huge number of cards and mechanics were useful only for a very short amount of time due to lack of support during balance changes or lack of synergy in subsequent sets. Sometimes the Hearthstone team comes up with completely unviable strategies, but more often we have interesting concepts that require additional tools to be implemented.
It would be logical to assume that mini-sets are specifically designed to replenish not-so-good archetypes with additional new cards, or create completely new ways to play, but unfortunately this doesn't always work. Any new content for Hearthstone is planned and developed long before its release. Under these circumstances, it is completely impossible to predict the state of affairs in the metagame and determine which decks will need support. In other words, the initial planning takes place as if in a dark room, but this is not the fault of the developers. These are purely technical limitations. In our opinion, the increase in the number of new cards only exacerbates the negative consequences of the conditions for the development of new content. This leads to an unpredictable increase in power creep and the appearance of cards that are too strong, which in turn provokes the appearance of archetypes that have significantly more benefits. Now we are preparing a video about the strongest legendary cards that will soon leave the standard, and we have found an abnormally large number of cards that have not left the metagame throughout their entire life cycle. This means that they have remained evergreen regardless of the situation in the metagame.
Unbalanced cards and synergies become a kind of core that forms dominant combinations. For example, Imp Warlock is so good that it has absorbed the Curse archetype. The same goes for Silver Hand Paladin. The deck can't exist effectively without the additional pure synergy.
The Ping Mage core is essential for many strategies including Big Spell, Quest, Spooky and Secret Mage. Fell's synergy is key to the most effective Demon Hunter decks. The Spirit core dominated most Hunter strategies until synergy got a few balance changes and so on. Sometimes players don't use the whole core, but only broken components. On the one hand, the evolution of strategies is a positive phenomenon, but at the same time, the dominance of the same cores in decks for a huge amount of time is very tiring, especially when most new strategies do not receive support.
By the way, broken combinations that are limited to a certain strategy are the modern way of balancing Hearthstone. One example is the combination of Gold Null and the Evolution effect. Combining just 2 cards allowed the player to get a random 10 mana minion in the early stages of the game. Moreover, after receiving an additional tool in the mini-set, the randomness factor was minimized, and the deck finally got out of hand, which led to the operational nerf of Gold Null. Subsequently, the entire archetype completely lost its effectiveness. The same goes for Spooky Mage. The archetype was effective as long as the Nightcloak Sanctum card went way beyond balance standards. After the nerf, this location lost its power but retained its usefulness, but this was not enough for the archetype to retain its effectiveness.
The original goals of the mini-sets were to increase the company's bottom line and shake up the metagame. In our opinion, mini-sets do not cope with these 2 tasks.
Despite the very attractive price, a small percentage of our subscribers purchase mini-sets for money. As a rule, almost half of the cards are initially useless. And some new cards, instead of adding variety and supporting weak strategies, reinforce archetypes that are already too strong, which in turn exacerbates the problems of the metagame.
If you've been following our videos for quite some time, you'll probably know that we're not as enthusiastic about the concept of mini-sets as most other content creators are.
A year ago, being in an incredibly difficult position from the Russian aggression, I was not sure that we would be able to continue to create new videos. This forced us to create potentially the last video on the channel. We decided to choose the topic that bothered us the most. And you know what? This video was about the hidden disadvantages of mini-sets.
Since for us all the negative consequences of this approach were quite obvious a year ago, but only now, the company decided to turn to the players with a survey about the future of mini add-ons. So how does the Hearthstone team see the future?
To start with, Blizzard wants to know how players feel about mini-sets in general and if they're shaking up the metagame enough. According to our surveys, the majority of the community loves the concept of mini-sets, so it's likely Blizzard won't learn anything new. The Hearthstone team is most interested in circumstances that may increase the likelihood of you buying mini-sets for money. For example, will you make a purchase if the mini-set additionally contains a diamond or signature legendary card, as well as additional cosmetic items?
We were a little scared by questions about the predictability of the purchase and the possibility of getting new cards for gold. It seems that Blizzard is considering ending the sale of all cards in the mini-set without the random factor.
But what's most interesting is the potential for new cards to be printed only for certain classes, which is an interesting proposition in terms of impact on the game. Since only 3 cards for every class are not practically capable of creating new ways to play, Blizzard also proposed to vote for an increase in the number of mini-sets instead of main sets, or vice versa for the complete disappearance of mini-sets and the appearance of 4 main sets per year.
By the way, one of these proposals definitely deserves discussion. We already talked about the pros and cons of implementing 4 expansions per year in one of our previous videos. Now let's consider another hypothetical scenario.
Imagine that each phase of the expansion will have its own unique packs, but the main add-ons will disappear from the game. Every month you will be offered to buy a mini-set of 45 cards for 5,000 gold or $40. Packs will be updated with new cards over the course of 4 months with the release of each mini-set. You will still be able to find new cards in packs, but you will have the additional option of getting all new cards for gold or money without the random factor. I know it sounds extremely crazy and looks very expensive. But in fact, this is an example of the adaptation of the modern economy to new conditions. Let's discuss this unlikely concept in the comments.
In general, we consider the survey proposed by the Hearthstone team to be rather useless. If the developers will rely on the results of the survey, then most likely, nothing significant will happen with the mini-sets in the new game year. Perhaps the mini-set of Festival of Legends will receive additional bonuses in the form of diamond and signature cards, as well as additional cosmetics. Perhaps this will be a separate offer that will cost a few dollars more.
In this survey, Blizzard does not offer anything fundamentally new to the players. And it's a little sad, as developers tend to adapt old tricks. By the way, the concept of mini sets is not new. They are essentially analogs of adventures from old school Hearthstone.
In our opinion, the game needs to introduce new approaches and experimental mechanics. Maybe developers should change the way they plan new content. If that's not technically possible, then it might be worth changing the approach to creating at least cards for mini sets, which make those cards more reactive and useful for a particular situation in the metagame. If this is also not possible from a technical point of view, then it might be worth introducing additional balancing tools besides buffs and nerfs. For example, a time limit banning system that will allow 2-week strategies to come to light.
To be sure, the current implementation of mini-sets is not a disaster for the game. Mini add-ons do not make Hearthstone worse, but they are not good enough to make the game better, as they rarely have a positive enough impact on the competitive environment, do not increase community interest, and do not increase the profits of the company. Most likely due to low income, Blizzard refused to create separate cinematics for mini-sets, which deprives the new cards of narrative and atmosphere. At the same time, this approach increases the entry barrier for new players, provokes power creep, and complicates the balancing of the game. In addition, increasing the total number of new cards does not lead to an increase in variety, but rather, on the contrary, reduces the number of archetypes and useful cards in the game. We believe this concept has potential, but it might be worth experimenting with new content creation methods and introducing new balancing approaches.
Unfortunately, we are not sure if the Hearthstone team is ready for unusual approaches.
Dear friends, what do you think?
Should the Hearthstone developers introduce risky experimental methods for a short time for balancing and printing new cards?
Or is it better not to risk, and leave things as they are?
Finally, we want to welcome our new YouTube subscribers. Thanks to each of you for joining the Mathematician Squad. We know that not all new subscribers are in this list, but we can only see the nicknames of public subscribers. These are users who do not have the subscription section hidden on their channel.
Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for spending this time with us. We really hope that we will have the opportunity to get in touch in the next video.
Take care of yourself.
And never give up.
Job's done.